Internet, welcome back. That was the week that was, week 11. Before we get started, I would like to just welcome back our faithful viewers. It's actually wonderful that you are so fantastic that you come back, all 80 of you. It's quite a good number for such a young show, so thank you very much indeed. And I am back here with Vince McLeod. Hey Vince, how are you?
Hey Bob, I'm doing well. It's starting to get a bit chillier here in Nelson, but it's not too bad just yet.
Yeah, let's hope we got a bit of grace before the winter sets in. And we are going to jump straight in, Vince, to the Ukraine-Russia war. We had a lot happening this last week. There was the drone incident over the Black Sea. There's the fighting in Bakhmut. There are the fighter jets that are going to be sent from Poland and Slovakia. Putin has an arrest warrant out, and Xi Jinping is planning to visit Russia. So the political maneuverings are intensifying, and it's pretty scary.
Things are definitely still escalating in that war. What concerned me particularly over the last week was when the Russia fighter jet took down the American drone, and many in the American political scene called for other fighter jets to take out Russian fighter jets and establish a no-fly zone over that part of the ocean. So I think that there's still a lot of people who are calculating that they want to escalate the war, and that's definitely worrying for us who are already having to pay so much money for basic foodstuffs thanks to inflation caused by it. I think from China's point of view, their involvement is because they see an opportunity to become the effective leader of the world. If they can broker a peace agreement between Russia and the West, or at least Russia and Ukraine, then I think they'll be the ones who are taking the initiative on the world stage and will have supplanted America then to a major extent.
I have a very interesting article from a chronicle called Eupipius, and it is titled Why We Must Mock the Virus Pests. And his idea is that the whole COVID fiasco was not a planned psyop against the people, but was a case of incompetence. He says that because we are not in power, we can't risk making these men more than they are. The correct strategy is to cut them down to size.
That's especially a pertinent point of view if you consider the context of the arrest warrant being put out for Vladimir Putin. I don't think that Putin is ever going to be arrested. I think the only way that could realistically happen would be if Russia lost a conventional war to Ukraine and didn't use nuclear weapons, which is extremely unlikely. I think a lot of people have been surprised by the extent to which the experts turned out to be wrong, or at least the experts who were pushed in the mainstream media were wrong about the effectiveness of the vaccines. Turned out that we didn't really need to vaccinate at all. Would have been just as good to rely on natural immunity. And so I think the mainstream media is going to lose a lot more respect as society continues to decay.
Well, here in New Zealand, we have data that was released on Wednesday showing that the current account deficit blew out to 8.9% of gross domestic product in 2022 as we imported more goods than we exported. And now that situation is going to be exacerbated as we try to rebuild after Hurricane Gabrielle. Vince, do you think that the New Zealand credit ratings could come under pressure from this?
The New Zealand credit rating is definitely coming under pressure, but so are many in other countries around the Western world. The COVID lockdowns and the ensuing problems from the rising interest rates have meant that there's been less productivity than usual, and that ordinarily would mean that our standard of living would go down, but people haven't accepted that this is the case, so they've really just ticked it up and borrowed the money to buy the same goods that they normally would have bought, and that's why their current account deficit is blowing out. There's no real way to escape it. They're either going to have to raise taxes, and this is not just in New Zealand, but in many countries all over the West. either going to have to raise taxes or they're going to have to cut down on the amount of consumption, which no one's going to want to do. So people are already unhappy enough about the state of things. But this massive current account deficit means that we're going to have to get even more unhappy, because we're going to have to tighten the belts even more than we wanted to.
It is very tough. In the New Zealand Herald, there was an announcement that New Zealand is following a world trend to block the Chinese app TikTok in government phones. And this is coming amidst comments that people are not aware of how foreign governments are using their data. Is this a danger for us?
It's a massive danger, and I'm astonished that it hasn't been taken into account much previously. This move by the New Zealand government is just following moves from other Anglo governments. They've done the same thing in Britain, same thing in America, same thing in Australia. I think Canada is the only one they haven't done it yet. They've banned TikTok because what the Chinese government is doing is using artificial intelligence programs to go through all of the video data on TikTok and establish a gigantic database of every single person in the West who has appeared on a TikTok video. Now, artificial intelligence is now advanced enough that the programs can read the video feed, and they can detect, for example, if you're tired. They can detect your blood pressure if it's higher than usual. They can detect from your skin color if you're missing certain nutrients. They can tell from signs of stress around your face how well you've done over the last week, the last couple of weeks. So it's already the case that from TikTok, the Chinese government can assemble an enormous amount of data about people, and these people would never guess that it was possible to determine such things by using artificial intelligence. So when it comes to blackmail, or at least the potential for blackmail, there's a gigantic potential for the Chinese government to use TikTok to blackmail people in the West, because they can figure out all sorts of things. You know, they can guess from how well you're sleeping that you might be cheating on your partner, for example, or they can tell perhaps by certain signs of stress at a certain time that you've got a gambling addiction. So they can really figure out a lot of things that would be considered compromised situations if you're thinking in terms of blackmail. So yeah, this move doesn't surprise me at all. I'm actually surprised that it didn't happen a lot earlier, and I think it's a sign of the world splitting up into an Eastern and West bloc, which tries not to cooperate with each other.
Our last article is a very interesting one. It's something that you have spoken about numerous times over the past few years. And it says that one dose of psychedelics can result in belief changes about the supernatural, non-physical world. Apparently, these psychedelics have the power to alter the consciousness, meaning, and purpose of a person's life.
It's been known since the 1950s, at least, when Aldous Huxley was writing about the topic, and he was dealing with the mescaline that had been given to him by Humphrey Osmond, who was a famous psychiatrist at the time. It has been known that one dose of a psychedelic is often enough to radically change a person's perceptions and thereby their behaviors, and in the context of such things as addictions, like drug addictions. Been known since the 1950s that one dose of LSD is often enough to cure alcoholism. And the reason is because it allows people to see into a spiritual world that they'd never otherwise thought it had existed. There's a lot of people out there who are really depressed because they've grown up believing this materialist narrative that you've got one life and then when you die, consciousness ends and that's it. And they find that narrative extremely depressing, but they've got no way to do anything about it because there's nowhere in the popular culture you can talk to someone who's got any better idea. But if you take a psychedelic, you can get woken up to the spiritual reality of the universe, and that can potentially lead to massive behavior changes, especially if you realize that you're not so depressed anymore, and so you don't need to drink alcohol all day. Then psychedelics can be immensely healing. And I think that's what we're going to see a lot of them being used for over the next 20 years.
Well, that's a bit of good news after all the bad news that's around us.
Yeah, it's good to finish with a white pill.
Absolutely. Yes, well, we have finished. And Vince, that was the week that was.
Cheers, Bob. I'll catch you next week.
The Alt Centre are clown world's good guys. They don't fit into boxes neatly enough to be someone else's tools.